Alex Rivera stood near the refreshment table at the diplomatic reception, trying to look professional while feeling completely out of his depth. This was his first major interstellar gathering. Dozens of species, elaborate protocols, everyone seeming to know exactly where they belonged in the complex social hierarchy. He was a junior trade negotiator, barely 3 months into his first off-world assignment, and he'd already counted at least 5 protocols he'd probably violated just by standing in the wrong place. "You look lost," a voice said beside him. Alex turned to find a Velrani woman, tall, elegant, with the distinctive long ears and striking features of her species. She wore relatively simple formal attire compared to the elaborate robes and decorations other high-ranking attendees displayed. "That obvious." Alex managed a self-deprecating smile. "I'm trying to look like I belong here while having absolutely no idea what I'm doing." First major reception. "Is it that clear? I'm Alex Rivera, Earth Diplomatic Corps, Junior Trade Negotiator," which is a fancy way of saying I mostly prepare briefing documents and try not to embarrass my superiors. "And how is that going?" "The not embarrassing them part. Ask me in about 3 hours when this is over." She smiled, genuine amusement rather than polite diplomatic response. "What brings Earth's Diplomatic Corps to Concordia Prime?" "Trade agreement negotiations. Earth is trying to expand commercial relationships across this sector. I'm here to observe, learn, and apparently stand awkwardly near refreshment tables." Alex paused. "What about you? What brings you to this gathering?" "Obligation," she said with a slight smile. "I'm required to attend these functions, but I find them more interesting when I can actually have genuine conversations rather than simply performing diplomatic protocols." They fell into conversation naturally. She asked about Earth, its diversity, its cultures, the challenges of representing such a varied planet in interstellar negotiations. Alex found himself genuinely enjoying the discussion. She was brilliant, asked questions that showed real interest rather than polite curiosity, and had a dry wit that made him laugh despite his nervousness. 20 minutes passed comfortably. Alex almost forgot he was at a formal diplomatic reception. Then she asked, with a slight smile that suggested amusement, "Do you know who I am?" Alex felt his face heat with embarrassment. He should have asked her name at the beginning of the conversation. That was basic protocol, and he'd been so relieved to find someone willing to talk to the obvious newcomer that he'd forgotten. "No, I'm sorry. I should have asked earlier. I'm still learning diplomatic protocols, and I'm probably breaking a dozen of them right now." Alex hesitated, then decided honesty was his only remaining option. "What would you guess, based on our conversation?" She seemed interested in his answer. "What would I guess?" "Someone important, obviously. High-ranking diplomat, cultural attaché. The way you talk about interstellar politics suggests serious experience." Alex looked at her directly. "But honestly, my first thought when you approached me was, that's the most beautiful woman I've seen at this reception." Which probably isn't appropriate to say at a diplomatic function, but you asked what I thought. Her expression shifted to something between surprise and genuine amusement. Before she could respond, another Velrani approached, an official in elaborate ceremonial robes who immediately bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, the council representatives are prepared for your address." Alex's mind went completely blank. "Your Majesty." He just told the Queen of the Velrani Empire that his first thought was how attractive she was. The official, clearly some kind of senior advisor, looked at Alex with an expression mixing horror and pity. Alex felt his entire career flash before his eyes, which was unfortunate since it was only 3 months old. "Your Majesty," Alex managed, his voice somewhere between apologetic and mortified. "I had absolutely no idea." Queen Lyra held up a hand, and the advisor immediately fell silent. "I'll address the council shortly. Give me a few more moments." Her tone made clear this wasn't a request. The advisor bowed again and retreated, though not before giving Alex a look that clearly said you just ended your diplomatic career. Once they had relative privacy again, Alex tried desperately to salvage the situation. "I am so incredibly sorry, Your Majesty. I should have recognized. I should have known." "How would you recognize me? We've never met." "And I deliberately chose not to wear my formal regalia for the reception's opening hours. I wanted to experience the gathering without the usual protocols that come with my position." But I told a queen that she was." Alex couldn't even finish the sentence. "Beautiful. Actually, you said I was the most beautiful woman at the reception. I remember the compliment precisely." She was definitely amused now, which somehow made Alex feel even worse. "That's completely inappropriate diplomatic protocol." "It absolutely is. Royal protocol suggests you should have addressed me as Your Majesty upon introduction, maintained respectful distance, and certainly not offered personal commentary on my appearance." Lyra's tone was conversational, not angry. "But here's what you did instead. You spoke to me as a person having a conversation. You were genuine, honest, and when I asked what you thought, you told me the truth without calculating how it might affect your diplomatic standing." "Because I didn't know you were the queen. If I'd known, I never would have." "Exactly. You wouldn't have been honest. You would have been careful, calculated, performative, like everyone else." She studied him with genuine curiosity. "You weren't trying to flatter me for advantage because you didn't know who I was. You simply said what you thought. Do you know how rare that is?" Alex tried to process this. "Are you saying you're not offended?" "I'm saying I found our conversation refreshing precisely because you didn't know who I was. For 20 minutes, I was just someone you were talking to, not a queen you were trying to impress or fear. I'm definitely afraid now." "Because you know my title, but during our conversation you weren't afraid. You were yourself. That authenticity is valuable." Alex's supervisor appeared in his peripheral vision, looking pale and stressed. "Mr. Rivera, if I could speak with you." "Actually," Queen Lyra interrupted smoothly, "I was just inviting Mr. Rivera to join me for the formal dinner, as my personal guest." The supervisor's expression suggested he just witnessed something impossible. "Your Majesty, that would be highly irregular. Mr. Rivera is a junior negotiator. The seating protocols." "Will accommodate my personal guest," Lyra finished. "I'm quite certain my authority extends to choosing my own dining companions." It clearly wasn't a request. The supervisor bowed, shot Alex a look that mixed warning with complete bafflement and retreated. "You don't have to," Alex started. "I know, I want to. Our conversation was interesting. I'd like to continue it." Lyra smiled slightly. "Besides, truth-speaking to a queen has consequences in Velrani culture. Usually positive ones, though most people never manage it. Truth-speaking. Addressing someone without fear of consequences, without political calculation, simply saying what you honestly believe. It's considered sacred but rarely practiced because people fear offending those in power." She looked at him directly. "You truth spoke to me without knowing it. That has meaning." The formal dinner was an elaborate affair held in Concordia Prime's grand ceremonial hall. Seating was strictly arranged by rank and diplomatic precedent, centuries of protocol determining exactly who sat where, which made it absolutely shocking when Alex found himself at the head table, seated directly beside Queen Lyra. Every other diplomat in the room was watching, some with barely concealed shock, others with suspicion, clearly trying to figure out what political maneuvering had resulted in a junior human negotiator receiving such obvious favor from the Velrani queen. Alex's supervisor looked like he was having a stress-induced medical event. "Try to relax," Lyra said quietly as servers began delivering the first course. "You look like you're expecting execution at any moment." "I'm sitting at the head table at a major diplomatic function. 3 months ago, I was filing trade documentation. I don't even know what this is. It's dinner with someone who enjoyed your conversation and wanted to continue it." Nothing more complicated than that. Except you're the queen of the Velrani Empire. That makes everything more complicated. Only if you let it. Lyra accepted wine from a server. Tell me more about Earth. You started explaining human cultural diversity before we were interrupted. I'm genuinely curious. Alex tried to focus on the conversation, rather than the dozens of eyes watching them. He explained Earth's multiple continents, the vast variety of human cultures, languages, traditions. Lyra asked questions that showed genuine interest, not just polite engagement but actual curiosity about how such diversity functioned within a single species. It sounds chaotic, she observed. It is sometimes, but also beautiful. We spent most of our history fighting each other over differences. Learning to cooperate despite those differences, or maybe because of them, that's part of what let us reach the stars. And now you're here, learning to cooperate with entirely different species. Now I'm here, accidentally insulting queens because I don't recognize them without their crowns. Alex smiled slightly. Though you did deliberately not wear identifying regalia. I did. I wanted to see how people would interact with me if they didn't know who I was. Most species treat queens as symbols rather than people. It's isolating. So you approached the nervous human who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. I approached the person who looked genuine. Everyone else was performing, diplomatic masks, careful protocols, conversations designed to advance their interests. You looked like someone just trying to survive the evening without embarrassing yourself. I failed at that spectacularly. No, you succeeded at something more valuable, being yourself. Honest, uncertain, genuine. Do you know how rare it is for someone to speak to me without fear or excessive flattery? To just talk. To compliment me because they found me attractive, not because they were trying to gain political favor. It's probably rare because most people have the sense to recognize a queen before complimenting her appearance. Lyra smiled, genuine warmth. Perhaps, but I've spent years being told what people think I want to hear. Calculated flattery designed to please me. Political compliments that mean nothing. You told me what you actually thought without any calculation. That honesty is valuable precisely because it wasn't strategic. As the dinner continued, their conversation ranged across multiple topics. She asked about his life, his family, why he'd chosen diplomatic work. Alex found himself being more honest than he probably should be, admitting his insecurities, his fear of failure, his genuine awe at being part of interstellar relations. You're refreshingly self-aware, Lyra observed. Most young diplomats project confidence they don't actually possess. You admit uncertainty. Is that appropriate diplomatic behavior? It's honest diplomatic behavior, which is rarer and more valuable. As dessert was served, Lyra made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the dining hall. I'm appointing Mr. Rivera as a special liaison between Earth and the Velrani throne, effective immediately. Alex choked on his wine. His supervisor looked simultaneously thrilled and terrified. The rest of the diplomatic corps erupted in barely suppressed whispers. Your Majesty, Alex managed once he could breathe again, I'm not qualified for. You're qualified by the most important metric. Genuine curiosity about other cultures and the courage to be honest even when, especially when, you don't know. You should be careful. Those qualities are exactly what I need in someone helping to bridge understanding between our peoples. The aftermath of that dinner transformed Alex's career overnight. From junior trade negotiator to special liaison to the Velrani throne, a position that came with resources, authority, and access that diplomats decades his senior could only dream of. But it also came with scrutiny. Other diplomats wanted to know how he'd managed it. Some suspected strategic maneuvering, political connections, or calculated flattery that they hadn't witnessed. The truth, that he'd accidentally complimented the Queen's appearance while not recognizing her, was both simpler and more complicated than any conspiracy theory. Over the following months, Alex worked directly with Queen Lyra on cultural exchange programs, trade negotiations, and diplomatic initiatives. They met regularly, sometimes in formal settings with advisors and protocols, sometimes in private conversations that felt more like friendship than official business. "People still don't believe I didn't recognize you," Alex mentioned during one meeting in her private office on the Velrani homeworld. "They think I'm lying about the whole encounter. Let them think that. The truth is more valuable than their speculation." Lyra was reviewing documents but looked up with amusement. "Though I admit, your genuine shock when my advisor addressed me as Your Majesty was quite memorable. You looked like you wanted the floor to open and swallow you." "I wanted exactly that. I just told a queen she was beautiful like we were having drinks at a casual bar. And it was the most honest compliment I'd received in years, possibly ever." Lyra set aside her documents. "Do you know what most people say when they compliment me? They comment on my wisdom, my leadership, my dignity, all appropriate for a queen. But you saw me as a woman first, royalty second. That matters. Because it was honest. Because it meant you were seeing me as a person, not as a symbol. Most people can't separate the two. They meet the queen, not Lyra. I met Lyra first. The queen came as a surprise afterward." "Exactly. And that initial meeting, before you knew you should be careful, before protocol and fear could make you calculated, that's what made our connection genuine." 6 months after that initial reception, Alex attended another formal gathering. This time, Queen Lyra was in full royal regalia, impossible to mistake, every inch the powerful ruler she was. An ambassador from a newly contacted species asked Alex how he'd first met the queen, clearly curious about the human who'd risen so quickly through diplomatic ranks. Alex's response: "I told her she was beautiful without knowing who she was. Turned out honesty is its own kind of protocol." Queen Lyra, overhearing from where she was greeting other dignitaries, added, "And it's the most effective one. He spoke truth without fear, because he didn't know he should be afraid. That's rarer and more valuable than any calculated flattery." The ambassador looked confused. "You weren't offended?" "Why would I be offended by genuine appreciation expressed without political calculation? He saw me as a person worth complimenting, not as a queen worth flattering. Those are very different things." Later, in a quiet moment after the formal reception ended, Alex and Lyra stood on a balcony overlooking the diplomatic compound. "Do you ever regret it?" Alex asked. "Appointing someone who started your acquaintance by not recognizing you and saying something completely inappropriate?" "Never. You gave me something I'd been missing: genuine connection with someone who sees me as more than my title." Lyra smiled. "Though I admit, your face when you realized who I was remains one of my favorite diplomatic memories. I'm so glad my mortification was entertaining. It was honest, and honesty, I've learned, is the foundation of any meaningful relationship, diplomatic or personal." Alex thought about that initial conversation, about how his complete ignorance of her identity had led to the most authentic interaction she'd had in years, about how his accidental honesty had opened doors